Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for informational webinar on the Collaborative Opportunities for Multidisciplinary, Bold, and Innovative Neuroscience, or Combine RM1 program. I'm joined by my program colleague, Karen David, as well as our review colleagues, Bo Shen and Lee, who will introduce themselves later in this webinar. We're going to go over some of the program background, the application specifics, as well as some frequently asked questions that we encounter, as well as ones that were provided when you registered. If you have additional questions as we go through this webinar today, there's a Q&A function and you can put your questions in there and we'll answer those at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll go ahead and hand it over to Karen. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Corey. Welcome, everyone. I'm Karen David, Program Director for NINDS. And thank you all for joining us and for your interest in our Combine program. Combine stands for Collaborative Opportunities for Multidisciplinary, Bold, and Innovative Neuroscience, and it uses the RM1 mechanism. Administration of this team science program is itself a team effort from staff across NINDS divisions and clusters, with special thanks to my co-leads, Corey Kelly, who will be presenting today and moderating the Q&A, and to Dave Owens from the Division of Extramural Activities. We're also thankful to our partners in review, our scientific review officers, Bo Shen Chen and Li Jia, who are also present in this call and will be answering review-related questions. We're recording this presentation and we'll be posting the slides and the webinar recording on our website. So for today, our goal is to help you get to know this funding opportunity, noting some key features as well as practical considerations such as application requirements and structure. It is our second year with this program, which we now call the Combine program. So we'll also mention what's new and how this program differs from other NIH mechanisms, such as the Parent R01 and NINDS P01. You'll also see text that says Section 4 or Section 5, and this is for you to be able to find details in the RFA text as needed. Some of the slides that we'll be presenting are text heavy, and this is by design, so you'll have more information to use for reference later. As for this presentation, we'll be covering around 40 minutes of material, and the other 20 minutes will be for answering questions. As Corey mentioned, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A tab below anytime during this talk, and we'll be answering them during the Q&A portion. Thank you to those who sent us your questions beforehand. We'll be addressing those as well. If we don't get to your question, please follow up with your NINDS program official or through our NINDS Team Science email. Also, check out our FAQs on our website as well, and the links will be provided to you later. So I'll start with a quote from our NINDS director, Dr. Koroshetz. We are stronger together through interdisciplinary team science. And team science is particularly important to neuroscience, given the complexity of the nervous system and the challenging questions about health and disease. No one person or lab is going to have all the expertise and tools needed to pursue challenging goals. Team science provides us the opportunity to pursue really difficult goals in a more comprehensive and rigorous manner, and also provides us the opportunity to take advantage of our increasing knowledge base and our armamentarium of technological capabilities to neuroscience. There are many possibilities with team science. The power of team science is that it will increase our ability to challenge existing paradigms, overcome long-standing roadblocks to progress, and/or develop new synergies across different scientific fields. We've bolded this text because this is part of the review criteria regarding significance. And we've listed here several interdisciplinary opportunities, though not comprehensive, but the overall theme is it bridges across disciplines, areas, scales, or species to pursue a specific goal. We can also use this funding opportunity to apply the cutting-edge tools and approaches, such as, for example, those developed with the BRAIN Initiative, and apply those tools to topics and disorders within the NINDS mission. Okay, so what are the key features of this combined program? And we summarize here the key features highlighting in yellow what's new in our second year of the program. We'll also be unpacking what we mean by some of the keywords here in later slides. Team science is powerful, and so we expect the goal proposed to be bold, impactful, and challenging, and achievable within the funding duration of 5 years. We emphasize that teams work towards a single focused goal and not propose a collection of independent pieces or aims. Hence, multiple aims are non-responsive. We want a goal that can only be achieved by the combined efforts of 3 to 6 multiple principal investigators, or MPIs, each with a distinct and essential expertise and also adequate bandwidth. Projects should also be of a larger scope and more complexity than what you would see in a parent R01, with a typical budget range of $500K to $1.5 million direct costs for first-year costs. We're also looking for thoughtful plans for team management and enhancing diverse perspectives through the required other attachments. So let's go through these points in detail. And overall, the main things to think about are specific combined requirements about the goal, approach, and scale. For the goal, what we're looking for is something bold and that will produce impactful results. We want a transformative objective with defined 5-year outcomes. By transformative, we mean that the goal proposed challenges existing paradigms, overcome long-standing roadblocks to progress, and or develop new synergies. The proposed work should also be challenging and of sufficient scope that it can only be achieved through a team-based approach. So why is the team approach needed to address the goal at hand? And lastly, there might be unavoidable risks that come with transformative goals and innovative approaches. So we inform reviewers that these applications will assume some degree of risk. In writing your application, make sure to balance these considerations of risk, reward, and feasibility, and carefully manage any risk, for example, by making sure you're thorough with your alternative approaches, and so on. What are we looking for regarding team composition? There should be an innovative combination of fields and expertise from 3 to 6 MPIs to pursue a single goal or problem. And each PI contribution should be essential such that they bring a distinct scientific viewpoint or expertise necessary to pursue the interdisciplinary approach. Teams must not be dominated by a single individual. And we also want an integrated plan and not a collection of individual efforts or a set of interrelated and parallel projects. Now, what are we looking for in terms of how the science is organized? And this is possibly one of the most important slides in this slide set because of our emphasis on integration. So our experience in the past year had been that teams struggled with proposing cohesive and integrated projects because of the usual view that multiple specific aims cannot be interdependent. And so for this new version of the combined program, we emphasize pursuit of one focused goal and consider multiple aims to be non-responsive. So how will this look like in your grant application? We understand that pursuit of a scientific goal would likely entail structuring your project into pieces, and you're free to call these pieces how you see fit, just not as multiple specific aims. So for example, you can call your pieces as approaches. But bottom line is what we care about are these 4 things. First is that the goal is focused. This is subjective and peer review will weigh in on this. What we also want is a truly integrated effort such that all contributions and pieces are essential to the goal. And we encourage you to apply the deletion test, meaning if you remove a piece that is essential, the whole goal or the whole house falls apart. Next is that there should be substantial and integrated contributions across the PIs and that the project is not made up of a collection of individual or series of efforts or interrelated and parallel projects. So a question to ask is, Will a series or several separate R01s or a multi-component PO1 be a better fit for what you have in mind? So why do these pieces needed to be studied together? And fourth, we also recommend that you are intentional about integration, explicitly describing to reviewers how you intend to glue all these pieces together. This could be through experiments, activities, planned outcomes, modeling, and or unifying frameworks that act as glues, serving to integrate and combine efforts across disciplines and the team members. Now, what are we looking for in terms of scale? We're looking for collaborations across 3 to 6 MPIs, and these PIs should function as co-equals as reflected in their effort. Now, the scale should also benefit from resources for team management, such as inclusion of a program manager or a specialized staff scientist, use of software, and so on. The scale should also benefit from the expanded page limit for research strategy, which is 15 pages and not your usual 12 pages, as well as thoughtful considerations of team science aspects such as team program management, defined goals, and diverse perspectives. Okay, so what is an ideal combined program and what is not a good fit? The ideal combined program for us is where 3 to 6 PIs integrate and combine their distinct expertise to solve a single focused transformative goal. The project should also have a thoughtful plan for managing the team, feasibility, and for incorporating diverse perspectives. And if each circle here represents a PI contribution, then this figure is a way to roughly visualize the convergence and integration that we expect. A structure that we don't want would be something like this, where the pieces and contributions are not well integrated. We don't want a collection of activities or projects, or something that could be better off as a series or multiple grants. I've mentioned that multiple aims are not responsive, and that the pieces that are proposed must be essential to the goal, and that there should be a strong justification why these need to be studied collectively. Another scenario that's not aligned with our expectations is where we have a dominant PI with sidekicks, or with PIs who play supporting roles as evident in the extent of their intellectual and technical contributions. Now, when talking about a focused goal, we don't want projects that are overly broad and open-ended and where we don't have a clear picture of what will be accomplished within the funding period. There are also topics that will not be a good fit for the combined program. And our goal here is to have your project find its best home, which may or may not be the combined program. Now, this is an NINDS-led effort, and so the topic must be fully within NINDS mission. So please consult us about this beforehand to avoid having your application withdrawn. And also this program is capped at 10 million total costs for first year costs, which will support roughly 4 to 6 awards. And this is unlike the parent NINDS R01 with a defined pay line. And as such, we're limited by how many projects we can support, which is why we encourage projects that are a better fit for other programs or RFAs, such as the BRAIN, HEAL, or ADRD initiatives, to go for those other RFAs instead, because those targeted funding opportunities have special funding allocation for those particular topics, likely leading to better success rates. So, for example, if your topic would be a great fit for a specific BRAIN RFA, I would consider that BRAIN RFA instead. But please take note that we do encourage application of resources and tools developed through the BRAIN initiative to be used or applied to topics that are specific to NINDS, such as, for example, specific disorders or diseases and so on, which will be outside the scope of the BRAIN initiative, but will have a home at NINDS. Applications in which the primary goal is to create, maintain, and expand and or disseminate resources or infrastructure are not responsive. We also have restrictions on what we can accept in terms of translational and clinical type of applications because NINDS have specific opportunities on these various types of clinical and translational research. If it is a clinical trial, we only accept those that NIH classifies as BESH or basic experimental studies involving humans or a mechanistic trial. We're happy to help gauge responsiveness of your topic. Okay, we often get asked, how does the combined program compare with other mechanisms, such as the PO1 and the parent R01? The main differences are in the structure, on our emphasis on integration, the scale, and specific team science features. So the blue here is meant to symbolize a single project or component. The PO1 program project is multi-component in structure. It is made up of multiple projects and cores. The parent R01 will have multiple aims, whereas the combined RM1 program emphasizes more integration in its goal and pieces in that it allows for one goal and that multiple aims are non-responsive. The scale of the RM1 combined program will also be typically larger than the parent R01 and more of a close match to that of a PO1. Now, the PO1 and RM1 are team science specific, team centric, with elements and resources that are team science related, and it's also reviewed in its own study section. Okay, now let's get to the practical aspects here of preparing the application. So this program is a pilot experiment. So we're starting off with one receipt date per year. The page limits are atypical. We have a 15-page limit for research strategy, and we require 3 other attachments, each with their own page limits. Throughout your application, the keywords to note are transformative, integrated, and innovative. Transformative in that it should address this first bullet point, and integrated in that applications should be intentional about integrating efforts as mentioned in this second bullet point. And note that the applications will assume some degree of risk that are intrinsic to innovative and adventurous plans. Because feasibility will be assessed, we recommend carefully managing your risk. Now, the application structure of the combined program is different from typical NIH applications, so please refer to Section 4 for the full details. In summary, the specific aims page and the 15-page research strategy have specific required information and subheadings. The application also requires 3 other attachments that we'll be discussing. So what do I mean by these being structured differently? Under Section 4, you will see that the specific aims have these required information listed here for your reference. And similarly, for the research strategy, we ask that you structure your application using these defined subheadings. Now, team science is challenging to do, so we've also added these considerations as other attachments to increase the likelihood of success. We ask for a thoughtful plan on how the team will be managed and led. We also want a clear action plan with timelines and benchmarks for success. Lastly, we want teams to capitalize on the opportunities provided by diverse perspectives. So we also ask for a plan for enhancing diverse perspectives. Because these 3 attachments are not typically included in parent mechanisms, we'll be spending some time talking about what is included in these documents. The team science needs effective leadership, management, and coordination to be successful. And both the team management plan and the MPI leadership plan are required. And the information in each of these plans are complementary. So the MPI leadership plan focuses on leadership and interactions across PIs, whereas the team management plan is more comprehensive and it focuses on the management of the whole team or key personnel, including the trainees. Team science allows for cross-fertilization across disciplines, but bringing people together, especially from different disciplines with their own specialized language, could be particularly challenging. So in preparing this team management plan, we recommend consulting this document that NCI put together with practical suggestions such as having a collaborative agreement template that you can find in the appendix and is related to the recommended subheadings listed below. Under these subheadings, this is where you can include justification for personnel to help you manage your team, such as a program manager, and as well as other needs that may arise. For example, in this last bullet point about data management, you can request professional staff if needed to help your multimodal or multi-scale data talk to each other and have it be accessible across labs and by the greater community. There's also the challenge here of credit assignment and authorship policies, especially with team efforts. And this is particularly important for trainees and early career stage personnel. So please consider the practicalities and these logistics, particularly in coordinating and communicating across different team members. The next other attachment that we ask for is the timeline and benchmarks for success. And this is for reviewers to be able to assess feasibility and the degree of integration and collaboration. So we ask that you include a timeline and chart noting the tasks and benchmarks and points of integration. And then the third and last attachment is the plan for enhancing diverse perspectives, which was started by the BRAIN initiative. And the motivation for this is to capitalize on what diverse perspectives have to offer. So PDP is a summary of strategies and activities by the team to advance the merit of your science through enhancing inclusivity. The most common misconception about this is on the definition of diverse perspectives. Our definition of diverse perspectives is broad, and it includes diverse perspectives from those doing the research, those participating in the research, and where the research is being done. For example, it can include those who are underrepresented from different scientific disciplines, career stage, backgrounds, and so on. It can also include those who are being recruited in human neuroscience studies, where the specimens are coming from and how it's obtained, and also on the different types of institution. In this one page, under attachment, you should list what these strategies are, the timeline and milestones, and approaches to assess progress. What we're looking for is a thoughtful plan that is customized to the needs, opportunities, and features of the project. When we say strategies, what exactly are these? I'm listing a few examples here, but a more comprehensive list can be found through this link. And activities can be at different levels, at the leadership team, trainees, outreach, and so on. The key is that these activities should be tied to your project and to your science. What I've seen that is insufficient are PDPs that includes generic activities or simply listing diversity efforts done by their university. It has to be specifically impacting your project. And here I'm noting that the PDP is part of each of the 5 scorable criteria. Okay, before I wrap up this part, let's talk about budget. So budgets need to reflect the actual needs of the proposed projects, and they would be typically at this range. The program is capped at 10 million total first-year costs, and you can include in your budget costs associated with the PDP, data sharing, and team management, plus some other useful things to note here. Okay, now let's move on to the review criteria, which I won't go into detail. And basically, all the key features that I've highlighted or talked about so far are formally described in the review criteria. And I'm highlighting here the criteria language that are specific to the combined program, which is in addition to the standard review criteria. So there's a lot of text here, but this is for you to be able to refer to this later. And all of these are aligned to the features that I've mentioned so far. For example, under significance, we're looking for a transformative goal that warrants a team approach. We want a single focus goal with defined outcomes. Investigators, it needs to be clear why each PI contribution is essential to the goal and that there is synergy in their interactions. The team management plan should describe how you're coordinating this team effort. So please make sure to have proper resources for team management and that you are inclusive of the different members of the team, such as the trainees. We want to assess whether there is an innovative combination of fields or expertise. And for the approach, is it fully integrated and feasible? Lastly, under environment, are the resources and infrastructure adequate? And I've mentioned that each of the review criteria have a PEDP component as described here. Okay, so let's move on to the next steps, and I'm turning it over to my co-lead, Corey Kelly.
Thank you, Karen. So for next steps, we ask that, because this is only funded by NINS, all these applications, the work has to be entirely within the NINS mission. So if you'd like some guidance as to whether your proposal is a good fit for both the NINS mission and the Combine RM1, we ask that you just send us a very brief one-pager, either a Word or PDF document, either to your program official, or you can send it to Karen and I at NINSteamscience@nih.gov. The things to include in this, and again, I want to reiterate that, this can be very brief and be a draft. Just a proposed title, your team composition, so who the PIs are and what their expertise is, and that helps us understand the integration that your team's proposing. Your plan goal, and again, this should be a single focused goal and how it's transformative to your field. A brief overview of the approach. And again, this is so we can assess integration. You'll remind you, Karen mentioned the deletion test. So we want to make sure that every component is necessary to achieve the goal. And lastly, just a very broad overview of the budget. It doesn't need to be detailed, just kind of where you're spending personnel money, equipment money, and your general, indirects or F&A costs. I do want to point out that because this is a fixed budget for this program, if your application comes in and we have identified a better RFA or a better mechanism like the BRAIN Initiative or the HEAL Initiative, we'll definitely link you up with those people so you can make the best decision, because you'll want to take the differing pay lines for these programs into consideration when you're submitting your application. I do want to highlight here at the bottom of the page, and again, we'll post these slides on our website, 3 resources that we've put a lot of work in to try to help answer your questions. We have a very robust website, and on this website, we cover all the things that we discussed today in more details, as well as an aggregate of quite a large number of frequently asked questions that we've received over the last year for this program. So if we don't answer a question today, definitely check those FAQs, or again, you can just email us at NINSteamscience@nih.gov. And lastly, we've provided a lot of language and examples and about the plan for enhancing diverse perspectives, because this may be new to some of you applicants. So with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to the question and answer session. The way this will work is, first, I'm going to hand it over to my review colleagues to answer some of the FAQs we got about review. And then I will go over some other questions that we get frequently. And then we'll go ahead and address the questions that you all have put in chat. And again, you can always email us if we don't cover your topic today. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Bhushan to talk about the review frequently asked questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Corey. Yeah. So for the review FAQs, so the first question is there a preference for new or established collaboration? And the answer is no. So this program supports highly integrated teams that are either new collaborators or established collaboration. So for newly established collaboration, it is important to include approach to ensure successful team communication and collaboration. And the second question is, so what, if any, preliminary data are required? So for this mechanism, preliminary data are not required, but it can strengthen the premise and the feasibility. So if preliminary data are not available, so you are encouraged to present other evidence of feasibility, such as track record, expertise, alternative approach, and other major life mitigate risk. And the last question about review is, what study section reviews the combined program, and how can I serve on the team science combined study section? So there's a specific NIND study section will be assembled, and reviewer will be recruited based on expertise needed for a meeting. And so if you are interested in serving on this study section, welcome to contact me directly, and we will select. Again, the reviewer recruiting is based on the application we receive. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Boshen. Okay, so we'll move on to some frequently asked questions that we've got over the last year. The first one, and I think this is what one of the questions in the chat was about, different funding priorities for funded applicants versus non-funded applicants. So for the Combine RM1, the special counsel review policy does apply. This policy is for funders with for applicants that already have an existing large amount of funding, $2 million in total costs. So if you or one of your MPIs does meet this special counsel review or SCR threshold, you will be subject to this policy, which again, the pay line is different for SCR, or it's higher or more challenging for SCR applicants versus normal applicants. Very important for the early stage investigators out there. If you serve as a PI on the Combine RM1, you will lose your ESI eligibility status if you're funded. However, if you do serve as a co-I or a consultant, you won't lose that status. So that is something to consider whether you're an ESI and this will be your first funded application. And lastly, for the R35 awardees out there, unfortunately, you cannot serve as a PI on this award just due to the structure of the R35. However, we recognize your expertise in your fields, and we strongly recommend that you serve as a collaborator or in some other capacity, but you cannot use funds from the R35 for the RM1 work. Grants management. So intramural investigators, if you are an intramural investigator, or if you have a collaboration or seeking to establish a collaboration with one of our excellent scientists here at NINS Intramural, we definitely encourage you to integrate that expertise into your team. There's a separate funding mechanism for funding pathway for the intramural aspects of the research, but nonetheless, you're still encouraged to work with the RM1 teams. Are foreign participants allowed to apply? Yes, I encourage you to go read this policy if you have further questions. The terminology can sometimes be confusing. Essentially, if you're an investigator at a foreign site, you can participate in the RM1. You just can't, the foreign site can't be the primary applying institution. It's a bit of a technicality, but if you have questions about this, just reach out to us or read the grants policy statement. And lastly, as Karen mentioned in her slides, we want to be clear, there is a total budget limit for the program per year. It's $10 million. So all of the applications that we fund in a given year have to be $10 million or less in total costs. However, there is not a cap for your specific application. We want your budget to reflect the work that you are doing that is necessary to achieve your transformative goal. That being said, based on our experience over the last year, we typically saw applications that were between $500,000 and $1.5 million direct cost. I will say that if your application is less than this, the scale or scope could potentially be more appropriate for another mechanism, such as a multi-PI R01. Again, we encourage you to reach out to us with the information in the previous slide, so we can help guide you in your decision making along with the appropriate program officer. And again, your budget will be assessed as part of the review process. So you really want to, whatever it is you are allocating, make sure you justify it as a part of your work towards this transformative goal. We're not going to go into the slide in detail, but we do want to let you know that it is here to help you make these decisions when you're looking at these type of awards that maybe have similar appeal. The NINS PO1, which there was a question about, which we will address in a little bit. The parent RM1, which could be the multi-PI RM1, as well as the combined program. We have some really good slides that help you decide whether your research strategy is better aligned with either one of these mechanisms. Last, is my topic within NINS. Again, like we said, because it's NINS funded, it needs to be entirely within NINS mission. So check with us, check with your program officer. We'll help you get to the right place, whether it's at the combined program, a different NINS mechanism, or an NIH mechanism as a whole. We had some questions about this in the chat. Is the RFA for a single site, multi-site, established teams with the different disciplines? Ultimately, we want to make it very clear that we do not have a preference for the general characteristics of your team composition, whether the institutes or the departments or the disciplines. What we do want to see is that it's integrated and that that you are utilizing diverse perspectives. So really, we want you to form the team that's requisite to achieving the transformative goal. And lastly, Karen mentioned this in the earlier slides, the recommended effort for PIs. Based on a calendar year, we're expecting everyone to put in 2.4, 20% if you're at less than a full calendar year effort. Okay, I will address a couple questions here, and then we will address the rest of the questions in the chat. So a couple of questions. The first one was really related to the investigators, the restriction to the funded investigator or different score consideration for the funded investigator. Again, if this isn't clear, please put it in the Q&A. But if you are an investigator that reaches the SCR threshold, then yes, there is a different score consideration. But otherwise, we don't have a preference for previously funded or currently funded investigators. And another question, can one of the PIs be on two combined applications if the projects are unrelated? Yes, you can. Of course, you want to be very certain that your role is necessary based on your expertise to achieve the goals of each of those distinct projects. And then, of course, as with all NIH grants, we wouldn't want to see overlapping work being funded on both those for your specific effort. Okay, 1 second, I'll queue up some other questions for everyone. Okay, so the first one we had from this was submitted during the registration, and I'll hand this off to Karen. Karen, could you please discuss how the last round was handled, specifically proposals that were scored but not percentile ranked?
Sure. So for the last round, we considered the scores, the team's response to the summary statement critiques, as well as our budget. So similar to the PO1s, a score of 30 or better will likely be discussed in our deliberations. But unlike the PO1, though, we're constrained by how much we can spend for the entire program. So we also accounted for the 10 million total first year costs that limit how many we can fund. So we hope to be able to announce these awards in the next month or so.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, and once we announce those awards, we'll also go ahead and update the Combine RM1 website so everyone can get a look and see what came in last year and what we funded. And of course, these are also published on NIH Matchmaker, which is another resource for this information. Karen, we have a number of questions regarding the single aim. One cites, I'd like clarification on the notice of one aim. It seems possible to have a relatively broad umbrella aim that effectively covers very diverse PI's research. Please clarify how this avoids being semantics. Another question, I'll just give them all to you. They're similar. How do you define a single aim instead of multiple aims, or can it be multiple sub-aims? And then I would like to clarify the text about being non-responsive where we have multiple aims. Is it multiple aims or multiple goals? And there's lastly an example that maybe we could discuss. I have a project in mind that proposes 3 different animal models, and they're considering each model as a different aim towards the same goals. So maybe
Sure.
we can talk about, the distinction between the aims and the goals and
Yeah.
projects.
I can go through each one actually. So the first one is that when we say one aim, it could be something that's relatively a broad umbrella aim, like understand the brain. So please clarify how this avoids being a semantic game. So great question. And I agree that we don't want something overly broad, such as we want to understand the brain, or something that's open-ended. This is why we emphasize that it has to be a single focused goal. And the word focused here is subjective. So we included this in our review criteria. We will be paying attention to what peer review thinks about the extent that the goal that you're proposing is focused and will lead to specific deliverables in 5 years. Now, the question about how do you define a single aim instead of multiple aims? Can you have multiple sub-aims, for example? So our experience in the past year had been that teams struggled with proposing cohesive and integrated pieces because of the usual view that multiple specific aims cannot be interdependent. So some of our teams that we interacted with were worried about that. And so for this new version of the combined program, we instead emphasize pursuit of one focused goal or aim and consider multiple aims to be non-responsive. So the question now is, how will this look like in your grant application? And we understand that pursuit of a scientific goal would likely entail that you structure your project into manageable pieces, and you're free to call these pieces as how you see fit, just not as multiple specific aims, because it has some associations and how it should look like. So for example, you can call your pieces as approaches or even sub-aims, as long as these pieces are essential to the goal and are tightly integrated. And then the other question we got is, I'd like to clarify text about not being responsive if we have multiple aims, so similar to what was asked. So are you using aims like how we would use aims in a specific aims page, or do you mean not multiple goals? So we've been using these terms interchangeably, but yes, we want one focused goal or aim. And what we ended up in the structure of past applications where we have multiple aims that were weakly related and appear to be multiple goals. So yes, just have one goal or aim. You can choose whichever to call it, as long as it is just one and it is focused. And then the last question is, I have a project in mind where we propose 3 animal models, mouse, non-human primates, and human, and we're considering writing each model as a different aim, all towards the same overall goal. So I recommend discussing this with us, but in summary, what I will emphasize is that this overall goal has to be focused, and that this goal necessitates studying this across these 3 mammalian species. So I will also emphasize what is tying all these pieces together, and how will you integrate findings across species, and how will that lead you towards your specified goal? And reviewers will weigh the necessity of each of these pieces, and they'll be applying the deletion test.
Thank you, Karen. Let's see, let's move on to some questions about fit for the RM1 mechanism. So I'll read a couple to you that are similarly related. So maybe Karen, first you could just discuss the fit of clinical trials.
Sure. The clinical trial types that we accept are BESH or a mechanistic trial. And I would say I would highly recommend send in your planned approaches or summary so we can discuss this with you and figure out case-by-case basis what will be responsive and what will be not responsive.
Thank you, Karen. And what about drug development and digital technologies?
Right. So similar to my response before, I highly recommend reaching out to us because we will be consulting our Division of Clinical Research and Translational Research to help you figure out what specific funding opportunity will be the best home for your project. So it might be the combined program, but it might not be. So what are the other funding opportunities that you could consider, which would be more specific to the topic that you have in mind?
And you would say, would you say the same thing applies to devices as well?
Right, right.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, let's see. We'll move on to some questions about the application structure. I have a question. Do you need to have separate cores like the PO1 or is without cores? Okay.
No cores, no multi-components. And if you do have cores, then I would recommend the PO1 instead.
Okay, wonderful. Now I'm just catching up with a couple new ones from chat. I'll answer a couple of these really right now. We had another question just about include investigators from a foreign country. Again, foreign components are fine. We do recommend that you read the NIH grant policy just to clarify whether that you have specific eligibility for that foreign MPI. Another question, how about partnership with the industry? Will this be considered negatively by the program? Again, we don't have any preference for who you're collaborating with, whether it's industry, academic, NIH, intramural. The key thing is that, you know, you first establish a single focused and transformative goal, and then you build your team of experts and PIs around achieving that goal. Whether they come, wherever they come from, we don't have a preference for that whatsoever. But again, we do encourage you to build bridges through this program and seek diverse perspectives in your collaborations. Karen, maybe you can answer this question about the PEDP. Could you elaborate on the part where the PEDP is a scorable criteria? Thank you.
Right. So I recommend looking at those 5 specific review criteria where PEDP is mentioned. And basically, we want the PEDP to be impacting the science. For example, how will it enhance your science? And that could be under significance, or the membership of your team, which would be under investigators. So if you look at each of those review criteria, then you would see how the PEDP would be taken into account. But we do tell reviewers that you don't have to be particularly strong in each of these 5. It could be that you will be strong in certain components, and what reviewers will be doing is look at your plan holistically, take into account how it will impact your science. And happy to talk more about this with you.
Thank you, Karen. If a 2023 submission is not funded, can be resubmitted as revised application in 2024?
We don't allow resubmission or revision. You can definitely send it back, but it will have to be a new application.
Thank you. Let's see.
And make sure you don't have multiple specific aims.
Let's see, I have a question here about equipment. What are the limitations on equipment purchases? I would say that, again, you know, we provided our general budget and for the average, you know, what we saw for applications and the total $10 million cost per year for the program. That being said, again, the driving factor for your budgetary decisions as well as your team should be what is necessary to achieve the transformative goal. So if your transformative goal requires equipment purchases, you know, within the scope of the project, then you can include them and, of course, appropriately justify them. But, you know, that may be something you could reach out to us and we could also help you with, because there is, as you may or may not know, other, you know, mechanisms for large equipment purchases should they be that financially burdensome. Karen, is it acceptable to have a project that addresses a fundamental aspect of brain function, but not in a disease-specific context?
Right. Of course, we accept basic science research, and I may have mentioned something that there are certain types of applications, for example, systems neuroscience, that would be a better fit for Brain Initiative. But we can discuss this with you because there are other scales that is not covered by those programs.
Thank you. We've got a question for you, Karen. With MPIs, how does one weigh the contribution of pure tool builders, developers, and innovators, and PIs focusing more on the question, neuroscience, and experiment, especially if the goal is focused and all components are critically needed?
Right. Like what Corey mentioned, is the focus here is on what are you trying to do? What is your overall focus goal, right? And then you build your team around that. So if it needs tool builders, developers, innovators, partnering with neuroscientists, experimentalists, then by all means propose that.
Thank you. I'll answer this question. Is there a submission deadline for the one-page project or is it rolling? A couple things to address here. It is rolling. Of course, the earlier that you provide this to us, the more time we'll have to provide you feedback, and hopefully, whether we guide you to the RM1 or to another mechanism, give you as much chance to make that decision before the deadline. This year it is in October. We probably will stop responding or for this cycle, a week or two before the actual deadline, just because we won't have time to provide you appropriate feedback. So again, I just want to emphasize that first page, it doesn't have to be something that you're going to submit into grants.gov. It's just for us to have a conversation, help you, get the right guidance. So get it into us as soon as possible, but it is rolling. I do want to clarify that there is a distinction between this one pager that we're asking you to send us to help you assess fit and the letter of intent listed in the RFA. That has a specific structure that's pretty much universal to most NIH applications. And the purpose of that letter of intent is actually more for our review colleagues, so they understand what applications are coming in, so they can recruit the appropriate expertise for the review section. So again, the one-page project fit description, just send it to us as early as possible, and we'll get back to you as soon as possible. Let's see. Karen, how about this one? Can you please clarify the infrastructure restriction? By necessity, some bold transformative goals may require developing new infrastructure to bridge research gaps.
Right, and by all means propose that if it's essential to your proposed goal.
Okay, let's see. We've got most of these. If I'm missing it, maybe just put it back in. Let's see one here. How many future application submission dates will there be? I think you currently posted 2 more dates. Will there be more?
Yes, our hope is that, because this is a pilot experiment, is that our institute will consider this a successful experiment and allow us to add more dates beyond what we have right now.
Thank you. Andrew, a letter of intent required, deadline. The deadline, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Karen, is 30 days prior to the receipt date. It is encouraged, but technically not required.
Right. And I would suggest talking with us way more than 30 days, so that we can discuss with you whether your project is responsive and flag anything that may be a problem with what you're proposing.
I think that's all the questions we have in the chat, unless I
Let me
missed
see how many applications were received last year and how many to be funded. We can't disclose that information, but please watch our website for the announcement of the awards, which will be in a month or so.
Yeah. We just have a follow-up from Nicole here. Nicole, we only fund Bayesian mechanistic trials. There can be some subjectivity, in your proposal versus what we interpret. So we definitely would encourage you to probably reach out to us, and we can bring in some of our clinical trial specialists and make sure that, if it is appropriate, that's clearly represented. And if it's not, we can get you to the right RFA for your application.
Cool.
All right, any other questions?
I think. Oh, let me see.
And again, if we didn't get your question today, or if it come up something later, please we encourage you to reach out to us at NINS Team Science at nih.gov, and we will get back to you.
There's one more. While you want all PIs to be co-equal, presumably you want the designated leader for the purposes of communication. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah, one will be designated as the contact PI, correct?
Right.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, we encourage you to check out our website in the coming weeks. Like I said, we'll be posting information on the funded awards as soon as we're able to make that information publicly available.
Great. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.